Roger Mark de Souza is Director of Population, Environmental Security, and Resilience for the Wilson Center, where he directs the Global Sustainability and Resilience Program, the Environmental Change and Security Program, and the Maternal Health Initiative. He joins us to discuss the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement symbolically on Earth Day. Roger Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So this is a big moment.
It is really a big
of
moment.
Climate change. Talk to us about the significance of this.
So we have a landmark agreement, the Paris Climate Conference of Parties, the 21st Conference of Parties agreement that was signed, that was negotiated last year. And on Earth Day this year, it's the opportunity for governments to sign onto the agreement and recognize its importance. What is significant about the agreement is that it's a really strong agreement. It calls for all nations to think about how they can reduce emissions to 2 degrees Celsius or less, down to 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. This is quite significant. It's a pivotal move to getting us to a decarbonized, climate resilient world.
Roger Mark, from the time that the agreement occurred back in 2015 until we moved towards signing, anything change along the way, or is the agreement intact as it was originally?
I think the agreement is still intact. We've had a number of countries, particularly from small island developing states, stepping forward to say we are behind this agreement 100%. And there's been a lot of discussion about the different components of the agreement, from climate mitigation to adaptation and to loss and damage. So it has spurred a lot of important conversations and mechanisms at the national level to determine how they would realize the goals under this agreement.
And when you talk about the strength of the agreement, one of those aspects that make it strong is the fact that this has been an inclusive discussion. Business has been included, the types of island nations and others. Is that the turning point? Was that the key element that made this possible?
I think the key element was that it was very inclusive. There was this a signature agreement between China and the United States as two of the largest emitters in the world that really paved the way. We had the strong engagement of small island developing states that really pushed a 1.5 degree target. And then you really had buy-in from a number of European countries and African countries. So there was really full engagement and participation in the process.
Now, you wrote a piece where you said this is a new era for climate diplomacy. Your colleague, Megan Parker, wrote a piece where she talked about climate diplomacy breaking out of its silo. Explain that to us. What is this concept that there was a silo and now there isn't?
This is a really important idea because this agreement signals that climate is no longer sidelined. It's central to our overall development priorities and well-being. It has put climate front and center. And we know that this has many impacts at multiple levels. But because this agreement was so encompassing and led to specifically looking at economic impacts, it has really propelled climate out of just being related to climate, being linked to overall development and human and ecosystem well-being, with important implications for the economy.
You won't pat yourself on the back because it would be egotistical perhaps to do so, but I'll pat you on the back. This connecting of the dots is exactly the way you and your programs have been talking about this for years. It seems like finally the world is caught up, and so it's not just isolated to an environmental question. Now we're talking about security and economies and all of these things as connected.
Yeah, this is thanks for that
pat.
Well, thanks for the pat on the back.
Right,
but it's really important. So some of the work that we have done, for example, working with the G7 foreign ministers on an analysis called A New Climate for Peace, has identified the connections between climate fragilities, security, conflict, and peace building. And in fact, there's a working group that has been established that President Obama and the Premier of Canada, Trudeau, have recently signed an agreement on, saying that they will work to identify ways that they can collaborate on climate and peace building. And in the State Department, there is recognition from the Secretary of State, Kerry, that there's a need to identify climate change hotspots globally, building on this analysis. So we see this agreement really set into place an opportunity to look at peace building, security, and well-being overall.
A final thought is on how we should view this in terms of the continuum. Is this more than just the first step? Or is this a significant first step, but there's still more to be done and more agreements to be arrived at?
This is a significant first step. It sets in place the mechanism for governments to sign on to the agreement. The agreement will be ratified when about 55% of the global emissions are accounted for by the signatories to the agreement. And it sets in place sets in motion discussions around financing mechanisms, particularly around issues such as loss and damage, which will occur in the next Conference of Parties meeting towards the end of this year.
I don't know if people use the phrase Happy Earth Day, but for those of you involved in this work, this will be a Happy Earth Day.
It'll be a good Earth Day.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and good Earth Day to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.